Both lyrically and sonically, Spring Day is a beautiful song which tells the story of loss. The deeply emotional ballad garnered recognition worldwide and even made BTS the first K-pop group to break into the US iTunes Top 10. The song is accompanied by a video that's just as artful, rich with symbolism and striking visuals. It was awarded Music Video of the Year in 2017 at the Minette Asian Music Awards, and rightfully so. The visuals alone were enough to warrant the win, it's just gorgeously shot. But lucky for us, there's a whole lot more going on symbolically if you know where to look. At its uppermost layer, Spring Day serves as a seasonal metaphor, comparing feelings of loss and sadness to a long, cold winter. One of the most dominating visual symbols is the train seen throughout most of the video. It's an allusion to Snowpiercer, the 2013 film by South Korean filmmaker Jun Ho-bong. Snowpiercer is set in the future, where a failed climate change experiment plunges the entire Earth into a deep freeze, killing all life except those lucky enough to board the Snowpiercer, a train that's designed to travel around the globe forever, never to reach a destination, trapping all those who inhabit it in an inescapable class system. The film is heavy-handed in its politics and commentary on capitalism, but the concepts that the boys reference in Spring Day stray from the politics of the film and settle more on the emotional, human element of the story. RM's verse establishes just how poignant this sense of longing and loss truly is. He invites us to imagine ourselves, completely alone, riding a train that never stops, but never reaches a destination either. It goes in circles, never escaping the cold winter that surrounds it. Oftentimes, this is exactly what grief feels like. We see Jungkook alone on the train several times, representing how isolated we can feel as we try and heal. In fact, our introduction to most of the boys shows them to be alone in some sort of setting. It isn't until 1 minute and 6 seconds into the video that we actually see any of them appearing in the same frame together. Again, this is meant to echo the lyrics and reflect how alone we can feel when we're in pain. Although Spring Day's lyrics are quite somber, the video poses a more hopeful message about the bonds of friendship. Towards the end of the video, it's revealed to us that although it appeared Jungkook was alone in all of those shots, he never was. The camera dollies out to reveal all the boys have been right there with him, all along. The video overall paints friendship as being incredibly powerful, but there's a couple shots in particular that stand out the most to me. Jungkook lights a match while alone, only to have it flicker out. In a following shot, he tries again, with all of the boys beside him, and this time, it remains lit. Whether it's an intentional illusion or not, I read the sequence as being connected to Snowpiercer. In the film, Yona's book of matches is meant to remind you that she's literally and metaphorically carrying the flame. The symbol of carrying the flame means that someone is carrying on humanity. We've seen this symbol in everything from the Bible to Cormac McCarthy's The Road, and now Snowpiercer as well. I think that Jungkook's flame carries similar weight here, but instead of being about carrying on the human race, I read it as simply being about finding the strength for him to live on and push through grief. As he tries to do this alone, his efforts may be in vain, but with his loved ones around him, he'll be able to light his own way and make it through the metaphorical winter. Towards the end of the video, we see Jimin emerging from the train, just like the characters in Snowpiercer. He's accompanied by the rest of the boys, who have all discovered that life can go on outside the train, outside of this relentless cycle of grief. You may or may not have noticed the name of the hotel in the video. It's called Omelas, which is a nod to the short work of philosophical fiction called The Ones Who Walk Away from Omelas. It's a plotless story which describes a seemingly perfect utopian society where no citizen knows anything of sadness, violence, or inequality, or anything bad at all for that matter. Everything they have is beautiful and plentiful, but it all comes at a price. A young child must be kept in constant misery in a minuscule basement in order to keep the city as perfect as it is. Everyone is made aware of this child's existence and suffering when they're old enough to handle the truth, but they come to understand that if they help the child, that would only be improving the life of one, while sacrificing the perfect happiness and health of thousands. Most are upset by this, but ultimately they decide it's worth the cost to let the single child suffer. Some, however, leave Omelas, unwilling to indulge in the perfection made possible only by injustice. The author tells us that she's unaware of where these people go, uncertain if anything even exists outside of the city. But they seem to know where they are going, the ones who walk away from Omelas. In the story, the child represents the selfishness of man. But as it connects to the Spring Day music video, I see the child as representing all of the things we'd rather not face. We are bound to face hard truths as we grow up, but we must decide, do we change and grow with our newfound knowledge, or do we choose to live in denial and false happiness, and therefore stunt ourselves? All of the boys are positioned in the roles of the ones who choose to leave Omelas. I'll come back to how this symbolism fits into the bigger picture a little later, once I filled in a few more gaps in the story. Before we move on, though, I'd like to point out one last detail from Omelas. It's mentioned that the idyllic city is just as advanced, if not more so, than we are. They have everything from washing machines to floating light sources. The laundromat scene in Spring Day didn't make a ton of sense to me before I read Omelas. I suppose the way it's shot puts a lot of emphasis on the circular motion of the washing machine, which to me echoes the idea of Snowpiercer going in circles constantly. But regardless, a washing machine still seemed like an odd choice to reintroduce that symbolism. It makes more sense knowing that it was most likely included as a nod to the short story. I later realized it also connects to a French art exhibit, which is referenced in the video, but I'll come back to that in a moment. According to the World Health Organization, South Korea has the second highest suicide rate in the world. With BTS's entire discography being so socially conscious, it shouldn't be surprising that they try their best to battle this statistic in any way they can. In and out of the recording studio, they openly discuss mental illness, seeking to raise awareness and decrease stigma. Most of all, they seek to tell us that we're not alone, that someone else out there has felt what you feel, and most importantly, things get better. With this context in mind, I'd like to discuss the three most poignant symbols in the music video: ribbons, shoes, and piles of clothes. I'll admit I didn't even notice the yellow ribbons at first until I read an article that discussed their significance. For those of you who don't know, yellow ribbons are used for a variety of symbolic purposes, but the one that's relevant here is their use as an emblem for suicide awareness. Shoes also hold a lot of significance when it comes to suicide. In Korea, it's common for someone to remove their shoes before taking their own life. In many cultures, shoes are strung up like this to signify the death of the owner. Some believe placing them up high serves to ensure that their owner will be able to easily find them again if their spirit returns, and they'll be able to walk that much closer to heaven. If the piles of clothes you see in the music video looked odd to you upon first watch, you're not alone. But like all elements of a BTS music video, their inclusion was overwhelmingly intentional. These visuals mimic a French art exhibit called Personnes, in which the artist, Charles Butansky, shows that material items are all we have left of someone when they die. Just their piles of clothes, the things they chose to surround themselves with, and nothing more. These symbols snap the lyrics of Spring Day into crystal clear focus, accentuating the fact that it's more than just a platonic anthem. It's a tale of unimaginable loss. Anger is often a natural reaction when going through the stages of grief, and we see this clearly in Yoongi's anger at being left behind. As the song progresses, we see movement towards the final stages of grief, towards acceptance. We even see hope emerge as the lyrics recognize that no darkness or season can last forever. So, how do all these symbols and allusions work together to give us one coherent story? The way I prefer to interpret the music video goes like this. At first, the boys reside in a place of perpetual happiness. That place is Omelos. They are young and innocent and carefree, until tragedy strikes. A loved one commits suicide. This tragedy is the equivalent of learning of the child in the basement. They are suddenly faced with the most horrible thing they've ever encountered, and they're forced to leave their idyllic haven far behind. Jungkook even tries to return to Omelos at one point, but he finds it's no longer the happy place he remembers. It's empty. But he is not alone as he walks away from Omelos for the final time. The boys ride the train through a desolate, frozen world. This represents the journey of grieving. It often feels lonely, and you feel as though you'll never reach your destination, but eventually you do. The boys emerge from the train, from the difficult beginning stages of grief, to see that they can survive outside of the train now. Although they still have some healing to do, they can do it together, outside, in a world that isn't as cold as it was before. Because they have each other. They'll continue to miss their friend, but they'll be able to keep their memory alive now, instead of trying to erase it due to pain. They can string up their friend's shoes, and finally, they can move on. This music video will always have such a special place in my heart. It's more than just a visually stunning piece of cinema, it's a profound story about loss and pushing through the darkest of times. Most of all, it's a reminder that things will always get better, and no matter how hard it is to take those first steps towards healing, you never walk alone.
무수히 춥고 그래도 어쩌겠습니까? 라면을 부르면 이렇게 와야 되는데
이 모습도 연기 아니겠습니까, 여러분?